Dragon King Avaren Cest extinguished Cindercliff Beacon with Morna Keel's own iron key while 40 dragon riders watched the last safe light on the eastern ash root die. The great flame folded inward without smoke. For one breath, the glass tower held only the dull red memory of heat. Then darkness took the cliff. Morna stood beside the cold brazier with her hands empty. She was 48, broad-shouldered from hauling fuel chains, with ash gray threaded through black hair braided against the wind. The skin along her palms had been polished hard by 26 winters of tending the beacon. Avaren had taken the key from those hands as though removing a weapon. Sky Marshal Voren Tide faced the assembled riders. Cindercliff is suspended from royal service, pending inquiry into unauthorized signaling. Keeper Morna Keel is forbidden to light, trim, signal, or approach any crown beacon. The riders avoided her eyes. Above them, dragons shifted on black stone terraces, their wing membranes snapping in the ash wind. The creatures disliked darkness near a departure ledge. They had been trained to launch toward light and return by it. Morna looked at Avaren. Ask him which auxiliary beacons answered last night. Voren did not turn. The charge concerns your flame. The charge concerns riders who survived because they saw it. Avaren's face remained still. He wore a dark flight coat fastened with bronze scale clasps and the narrow black circlet used when he flew with the fleet. He had come to Cindercliff after battles for years, sometimes with blood dried beneath one ear. He would sit beside the furnace while Morna cleaned soot from the mirrors. She had never asked whether he had won. She had asked whether every rider had returned. Now he held the key at his side. Your beacon burned 3 red intervals after the royal route closed, he said. It burned because 3 riders had not crossed the western count line. Those intervals were seen beyond our border. Light is often seen by people you do not intend to save. Voren unfolded a signal ledger. Enemy scouts changed position within the hour. 2 supply dragons were struck the following dawn. The marshal's office concludes that the beacon exposed the fleet corridor. Morna looked at the ledger. Show the wind record. Voren's mouth tightened. The royal inquiry will review all relevant documents. The beacon cannot be accused by a page that leaves out the ash wind. Avaren studied her. What would the wind change? Red glass does not carry east during a cliffward gale. The signal you claim reached the border would have bent inland. Voren closed the ledger. Keeper testimony cannot overrule military observation. No, but weather can. A few riders shifted. Avaren heard them. Authority settled over his features before doubt could. You continued after a closure command. I continued until the return count was complete. You placed your judgment above fleet order. I placed living riders above a schedule. Voren stepped closer. A beacon keeper sees one ledge. The crown sees the war. Morna's gaze moved to the dark horizon. My son vanished because the crown saw a fuel ledger. Silence passed through the tower court. 15 years earlier, the palace had reduced beacon oil during a winter campaign. 3 lights went dark before dawn. Morna Keel's training wing never reached Cindercliff. No body returned. Morna had kept the beacon ever since. Avaren's fingers tightened around the key. That loss does not grant you private command. No, it taught me what private command costs when it is hidden inside a royal order. Voren signaled to 2 officers carrying a chain box for confiscated tools. Morna removed her trimming knife, soot brush, and the brass lens gauge Tovan had made as an apprentice. She placed each item into the box. When Voren reached for the gauge, she closed her hand around it. It is mine. It was used in royal service. It was made by my son. Avaren looked at Voren. The gauge remains with her. One mercy. Small enough to require nothing from him. Morna took it back. Tovan had not left her a ghost. He had left a gauge built by a boy who believed light should be measured before men rationed it. Then record that you extinguished the eastern return light before the night patrol landed, she said. The patrol was recalled. By whose confirmation? Mine, Voren answered. The first alarm bell rang below the cliff. Every dragon lifted its head. A second bell followed. Not attack. Missing flight. A signal runner climbed the final steps, ash coating his mouth. 16 riders from the Sable Wing failed to cross the inner watch line. Voren took the message. They were ordered to return by the North Shelf. The North Shelf Auxiliary is dark, Morna said. It was inspected at dusk. Dark is not inspected. Avaren faced the runner. Last confirmed position? Beyond the hollow ash. Morna looked toward the cold beacon. Their dragons will circle for Cindercliff. The beacon is evidence, Voran said. It remains extinguished. Then light the auxiliary line. No keeper has clearance until the network is secured. Morna stared at Avaren. He had once sat beside her furnace while half his riders remained missing. Tonight he stood between the same darkness and the authority he had chosen to trust. Give me the key. No? Then order someone else to light it. No beacon burns until we know which signals were compromised. The third alarm bell rang. From within the dead brazier came a dry tapping. Voran turned. The sound spread through the cold iron basin, delicate as rain against bone. Morna did not move. Open the ash grate, Avaren ordered. No? His gaze snapped to her. What is inside? An unfinished return. The brazier seams began to glow, not with flame, with thousands of tiny amber bodies waking beneath the cinders. The first ember beacon moth crawled onto the black rim. Fire trembled along its wings. Another followed. Then 10, then hundreds, carrying points of light the extinguished beacon had not produced. Voran stepped back. Forbidden keeper craft. They do not obey me, Morna said. They remember. Ember beacon moths did not answer guilt, loyalty, or keeper blood. They nested in old ash where return light had burned longest. When a beacon was extinguished before the rider count was complete, they carried the last unfinished heat direction into the dark. The moths did not defend Morna. They remembered unfinished return light. They rose through the open crown of the tower. They did not circle her or touch the key in Avaren's hand. They turned toward the hollow ash, where 16 riders remained beyond the completed count after the royal light went dark. Voran had written the charge. Avaren had put darkness behind it. Far beyond the cliff, one answering dragon roar broke through the storm. The moths had not cleared Morna. They had only shown that the dark still contained riders. Their amber bodies streamed toward the hollow ash in a thin, wavering line. They marked the unfinished direction of return light. Nothing more. Vorantide watched them vanish into the storm. Forbidden keeper craft, he said, unregistered and now interfering with a royal search. They are not searching, Morna replied. They remember where the count stopped, a distinction made by the woman under investigation. Avaren still held her iron key. He had stopped Voran's men from taking Tovan's gauge. He had not returned the light. Preserve the moth trail, he ordered. No rider follows it until the records are opened. Morna looked at him. Every moment you spend proving the dark exists is a moment 16 riders remain inside it, and every false signal risks sending another wing after them. Then, open the wind record. Voran stepped between the signal table and the king. Military charts contain fleet corridors and patrol timing. They cannot be displayed before a suspended keeper. She is a material witness, Avaren said. Then question her. Do not give her the network. Morna folded her hands behind her back. The accusation says my red intervals traveled east to enemy scouts. The gale blew cliffward. If the official wind record agrees, that light could not have crossed the border. Voran's expression did not shift. Enemy observers use elevation, mirrors, and relay fires. You cannot reduce war to one gust. No. But you reduce treason to one lamp. The moths were already dimming beyond the outer ridge. Avaren turned to the signal clerk. Open the Cindercliff windbook for last night. Voran's voice hardened. My king, that was an order. The clerk unlocked a brass case beneath the signal desk. Inside lay weather folios marked by hour, pressure, ash density, and wind direction. The line for the third red interval read, Cliffward gale, high ash drag, eastward visibility, none. Morna pointed lower. Read the carry estimate. The clerk swallowed. Red glass projection bent inland by 6 ridges. Border exposure impossible from Cindercliff height. Voran leaned over the page. Impossible by direct sight. The charge says the enemy saw Cindercliff, Morna said. The charge says your continued signal compromised the corridor. Through what relay? That remains classified. Then your accusation cannot travel any farther than my light did. Avaren looked toward Voran. Was a relay identified? Enemy movement followed within the hour. Operational inference was sufficient. For closure? For immediate security. Voran had written the charge. Avaren had put darkness behind it. The king did not look away from the windbook. Open the North Shelf auxiliary log. Voran stopped the clerk. Those records are under marshal seal. Break it, Avaren said. The wax split beneath the clerk's knife. The log recorded a dusk inspection, lens alignment, full fuel basin, and keeper confirmation. It bore the mark of a route officer under Voren's command. "Who inspected it?" Morna asked. "Lieutenant Seraph," the clerk said. "He has never tended that beacon. He is certified for route review," Voren replied. "Certified to sign a page, not to know whether a dead lens is cold." Avaren turned toward her. "What do you mean?" Morna removed Tovan's brass gauge from her belt. A silver needle rested behind clouded glass. Tovan had not left her a ghost. He had left a gauge built by a boy who believed light should be measured before men rationed it. "North shelf glass holds warmth for 4 hours after full burn," she said. "If it was lit at dusk, the lens should still have carried heat when the missing bell rang." Voren's mouth tightened. "You have not touched the lens." "No, but the moths turned where the auxiliary light should have continued their route." The amber stream bent north before passing into hollow ash. It did not name a culprit. It showed only that the unfinished return light had met darkness where another beacon belonged. "The moths do not prove sabotage," Voren said. "They prove the route expected light and found none. The gauge can show when the lens last burned." Avaren faced a flight captain. "Take 6 riders to North Shelf. Bring back the lens housing, fuel measure, and inspection chain." Morna stepped forward. "I go with them." "No, you will not know what the glass says. You are suspended, and your riders are missing. You remain here as witness." The refusal struck because it came after evidence, not before it. He still believed authority could separate her knowledge from the woman who carried it. The captain launched with 5 riders. Voren ordered search dragons prepared for a northward sweep. Morna stopped beside the launch chain. "If you launch before knowing which beacon was dark, you may drive the wing deeper into the basin. We cannot wait for perfect certainty." "You demanded perfect certainty before relighting Cindercliff." Avaren heard that. He did not return the key. The North Shelf riders returned before midnight carrying the auxiliary lens in a padded iron frame. Ash lay thick across it. The fuel basin was nearly full. Morna placed Tovan's gauge against the black glass. The needle did not rise. Last full burn was not dusk. "How long?" the captain asked. "More than 12 hours before the recorded inspection." Voren examined the instrument. A private gauge cannot overrule a certified log. It can be tested against the reserve lens. A matching pane was heated. It held the gauge needle above the first silver mark, exactly as Tovan's notes predicted. The recovered lens remained dead. "Dark is not inspected," Morna said. "It is survived if someone leaves a path." Avaren ordered the inspection chain opened. 3 signatures appeared beneath the dusk entry. Lieutenant Seraph, a marshal clerk, and the route authority permitting auxiliary, darkening during corridor closure. The route order carried Voren Tide's personal mark. Below it stood the authority under which the order had been issued. King Avaren Cest. Eastern route closure. Full discretionary power delegated to the Sky Marshal. The order did not prove Avaren had chosen the darkness. It proved the darkness had been allowed to wear his name. Voren Tide stood beside the opened route ledger while the last amber moths thinned over hollow ash. "Full discretionary authority means exactly what it says," he told the witnesses. "During an eastern closure, auxiliary lights may be extinguished to prevent enemy relay. North Shelf was darkened under lawful wartime command." Before the return count was complete, Morna said, "The Sable Wing had received recall. A recall is not a landing. The Marshal's office determines when a route ends." "No, the count line does." Avaren still held Morna's iron key. "Bring the return count statute," he ordered. Voren's jaw tightened. "Keeper law cannot govern fleet security." "Bring it." A signal clerk opened the narrow, bronze-bound volume kept beneath the alarm bells. Morna knew the clause without looking. The clerk read, "Upon closure of a royal route, outbound direction may cease immediately. Return light shall remain active until every launched rider has crossed an inner count line, landed at a recognized beacon, or been entered as lost by witnessed command." "Were the 16 riders entered as lost?" Morna asked. "No," the clerk said. "Did they cross the inner line?" "No." "Did they land elsewhere?" "No confirmed landing." "A closure order could end a route," Morna said. "It could not erase riders still inside it." Voren pointed to a later military amendment. "Emergency marshal discretion supersedes fixed beacon procedure when illumination creates enemy exposure." "Read the condition," Morna said. The clerk hesitated. Avaren looked at him. "All of it. Supersession applies where alternate return guidance has been confirmed. Avaren turned toward the North Shelf log. What alternate guidance was confirmed? Voren answered. Guide riders were dispatched. From which squadron? My private route wing. When? At second bell. The sable wing vanished before second bell, Morna said. They were expected to hold above hollow ash until guidance arrived. Dragons cannot hold forever in an ash basin. Military riders are trained for delay. Wings are not arguments, Marshal. A roar came from beyond the ridge, weaker than the first. The moth line flickered. Hundreds had risen from the brazier. Fewer than 100 still held the unfinished direction. Their fire was paling from amber to gray. The moths are failing, a captain said. They are fading, Morna corrected. Memory cannot burn forever without a flame to answer it. Voren folded his arms. Then they are useless as evidence. They were never evidence of guilt. They were evidence that return light ended before return did. Avaren looked toward hollow ash. The storm was a wall of moving black, his gaze fixed on it too long. Morna noticed. Once, after the Ashfall campaign, he had come to Cindercliff with one eye swollen shut and the other unable to follow the furnace mirror. He had never told the court. Now he narrowed his eyes as if forcing the dark to become legible. Prepare a controlled return. Light, he said. Voren moved at once. My king, Cindercliff remains compromised, not a full corridor signal. One interfacing white interval. The enemy may still detect reflection. The cliffward gale bends it inland, Morna said. Voren turned on her. You remain suspended. By end of 6. Voren turned on her. And you remain without a keeper who knows how to narrow the mirror. Avaren held up the key. You will instruct the signal crew. No. The refusal cut across the tower court. His expression hardened. 16 riders are missing. Yes. Then why refuse? Because a crew obeying your hand will repeat the same mistake when I am gone. A return light is not a royal favor. It is keeper authority under return count law. You are asking for reinstatement before the inquiry is complete. I am asking you not to turn rescue into another temporary exception. The moths dimmed again. Evidence did not warm a dragon's wings. Voren spoke quietly. If you restore her authority now, every keeper will claim power to ignore closure orders. If he does not, Morna said, every marshal will know a rider count can be buried beneath the word emergency. Avaren looked at the key. He had taken it from her before witnesses. Returning it would admit that the hand he had distrusted was the only hand able to use the law he had ignored. He closed his fingers around the iron. Morna Keel is not reinstated, he said. Her punishment is suspended. She will conduct one witnessed return interval under my direct order. Half measure. Still command. Still his key. Morna did not move. Return light was not a signal to the enemy, she said. It was a promise to the missing. Promises cannot be lit by men who reserve the right to extinguish them before the count is done. Another roar reached them. This one broke midway through. A dragon losing height. The remaining moths faltered as one body, then recovered their northward line. Avaren's face changed, not into apology, but into decision stripped of ceremony. He crossed the court and stopped before Morna. Voren said, Do not surrender royal evidence. Avaren ignored him. Witness this, he told the captains. Return count law remains active. Marshal discretion is suspended wherever alternate guidance was not confirmed. Morna Keel holds operational authority over Cindercliff until every sable wing rider is accounted for. He placed the key in her palm. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. Authority returned because lives still depended on it. Morna closed her fingers around the iron. Open the inner shutters, she ordered. White glass only. Narrow the mirror, 6 ridges inland. No outbound flare. The signal crew moved. Voren did not. Avaren faced him. You will obey the keeper. The last moths were nearly dark. Morna fitted Toven's gauge beneath the cold lens. The needle rested at nothing. Toven had taught the gauge to measure heat. Men had taught the ledger to measure convenience. She inserted the key. The lock turned once, then stopped. Something had been driven into the ignition channel from the other side. Morna withdrew the key and held it beneath the lantern. Black sealing wax clung to its teeth. Not beacon wax. Marshal wax. Someone had prepared Cindercliff to remain dark, even if Avaren changed his mind. The wax did not name a hand. It named the office that wanted even repentance delayed. Morna held the black residue beneath the lantern while the last ember beacon moths trembled beyond the tower crown. Vorentide examined the key without touching it. Marshal wax is used for emergency quarantine, he said. Cindercliff was placed under evidence lock. A sealed ignition prevents hostile relight. A quarantine plug is laid across the outer tooth, Morna replied. This was driven into the channel to prevent access from either side, to prevent the key from turning after it had already been returned. Avaren looked toward the dead brazier. You cannot know when it was placed. Not yet. The moths shifted in the ash wind. Their line had thinned to scattered amber sparks. They were no longer showing the way. They were showing how little time was left. A dragon cried beyond hollow ash. The sound dropped lower before the storm swallowed it. Open the service flue, Avaren ordered. Voren stepped forward. The furnace interior remains under marshal quarantine. Disturbing it destroys chain of custody. Every scrape of wax from that channel cost the riders another breath of sky. That does not make contamination lawful. Delay is not purity when men are dying inside it, Morna said. Avaren faced the tower officers. Record each hand that enters. Open the flue under witness. The rear service plate had been bolted from inside the furnace chamber. 2 signalers removed the bronze housing while a clerk marked every tool. The narrow shaft beyond carried soot, old ash, and a fresh black smear. Morna leaned close. Someone entered after the beacon died. Inspection crews entered under route closure, Voren said. Which crews? Marshal sealers and evidence officers. No keeper? Keepers were suspended. Then only your office had lawful access. Lawful access is not proof of sabotage. No, it is the beginning of a list. The access register named 4 people who entered after Avaren extinguished the flame. Lieutenant Seraph, 2 route sealers, and a marshal evidence officer. Their stated purpose was to secure ignition against unauthorized relight. Voren pointed to the line. Exactly as I said. Morna lifted Toven's gauge. Bring me a shaving from the outer smear and one from the key. The samples were taken with separate silver blades and placed on heat plates. Morna fixed Toven's gauge above the first. Field seal wax softens below beacon wax because soldiers must break it in winter. The outer smear melted cleanly and released the mineral scent of quarantine resin. The wax from the key blistered instead. Coarse ash grains surfaced inside it. That is not quarantine wax, Morna said. It came from a marshal field kit, Voren replied. Yes, mixed with furnace ash to harden inside a turning channel. A common reinforcement. For a door seal. Not an ignition lock. Your distinction depends upon keeper custom. It depends upon whether a key can still turn. Avaren looked at the clogged channel. How old is the plug? Morna placed the gauge against the inner metal. The needle barely moved. Toven had built the gauge to measure heat. Tonight it would measure how long a lye had been cooling in the lock. The furnace was still warm when this was set, she said. It was placed after you extinguished Cindercliff, before the brazier lost its retained heat. Voren answered at once, which is when an evidence quarantine would be applied. Then why drive it through the service flue instead of marking the outer lock? To prevent anyone with a duplicate key from relighting it. Morna's is the only registered key, the signal clerk said. Voren looked at him. Then the measure protected against the keeper under accusation. The admission was procedural, not personal. Cindercliff had been prepared to resist Morna even if royal command changed. Emergency need had restored her hand. Law had not restored her name. Clear it, Avaren said. Morna held out her palm. My trimming knife, Voren objected. Confiscated tools remain sealed. Then choose whether evidence stays perfect or riders stay alive. Avaren opened the chain box and gave her the knife. He had returned the key because riders were dying. He had not yet returned the trust he had killed with it. Morna knelt at the ignition housing. The wax had fused between the teeth. She scraped in narrow strokes, catching each fragment in a copper tray. The moth line lost another dozen lights. One struck the tower glass and went dark. Faster, a captain whispered. If I score the ignition tooth, the mirror gate will jam open and expose the full corridor. Relighting the beacon would not unmake the order that darkened it. Done carelessly, it could create the danger Voren claimed had existed. Avaren crouched beside her. What do you need? Pressure on the lower plate, steady, not strong. He placed both hands against the bronze fitting. Here? Lower. He obeyed. Voren and the riders watched the Dragon King hold the mechanism while Morna worked. The final wax ridge broke free. Morna inserted the key. This time it turned. Inner shutters to 6 ridges, she ordered. White glass, 1 interval only. The crew opened the narrow channel. Morna measured the mirror angle with Tovan's gauge, then drew forbidden reserve fire from a red clay vessel beneath the keeper's floor. Voren's head snapped toward it. Unlicensed ember stock. Emergency return fuel, Morna said. Stored because the crown once rationed a beacon while my son was still in the sky. Avaren said nothing. She touched the ember to the wick. Cindercliff did not blaze. It breathed one narrow white line into hollow ash. The surviving moths caught the light and brightened, holding the unfinished route a little longer. Far inside the storm, pairs of dragon eyes opened one after another. 4, 6, 10, 16. The riders were alive. Then the lowest pair dropped beneath the line of light. One dragon was already falling. Morna struck the cliff bell once and ordered every launch chain released. The falling dragon vanished below the white return line before the echo reached the lower terraces. 2 rescue mounts, she said, no armor. Carry the catch net and 1 lift chain. Voren Tide stepped in front of the launch crew. The marshal guide wing is already approaching hollow ash. They are too high. You cannot see through that storm. I can see where the moth line broke. The ember beacon moths did not descend after the falling dragon. Their unfinished heat direction remained level, marking the route the flight should have held. The missing pair had dropped beneath it. Morna pointed toward the lower western shelf. Launch beneath the ash current, rise on my bell. Avaren moved toward his black war dragon. You remain at the beacon, Morna said. His hand stopped on the saddle clasp. My riders are falling, and Cindercliff needs the authority you just returned to stay here where every officer can witness it. You would send others where I will not go? I would keep the king from turning a rescue into a command contest. Voren watched them. Avaren's expression hardened, but he stepped away from the dragon. What do you require? Hold the inner shutter at 6 ridges. Do not widen it, unless I say. He took the bronze lever. One of the rescued captains looked surprised to see the Dragon King waiting beneath a keeper's order. Morna did not. She had no time to admire obedience that should never have required disaster. The 2 rescue dragons launched below the cliff. Their riders carried a chain net stretched between them, almost invisible against the storm. Morna watched the moth line, the angle of the white interval, and the pressure needle on Tovan's gauge. The needle trembled left. 3 points south, she called into the signal horn. Stay below the hot ash. Voren looked at the gauge. That instrument measures lens heat, not flight pressure. Tovan calibrated the side needle against furnace draw. Ash pressure enters the tower before the storm reaches the cliff. A boy's modification is not fleet equipment. No. Fleet equipment said the north shelf burned at dusk. The lower bell answered once. The rescue riders had heard her. A weak dragon cry rose from beneath the cliff. Morna narrowed the mirror until the white line touched only the lower cloud shelf. Now. Avaren opened the shutter 1 finger wider. The return light caught scales below the ash. A bronze dragon rolled through the storm with 1 wing folded against its body. Its rider hung from the saddle by a single strap. The rescue mounts came beneath it. Net high, Morna ordered. Do not catch the broken wing. Take the chest and hindquarters. The first chain tightened. The falling dragon struck the net hard enough to drag both rescue mounts downward. Avaren gripped the shutter lever. Widen the light. No. They need visibility. They need lift. A wider beam will heat the upper ash and collapse it onto them. His eyes fixed on the storm. He could not see the lower current. Morna understood then what she had noticed after the Ashfall campaign. His gaze followed brightness, not depth. He could command in daylight and read a battlefield from maps. But darkness had become a country he entered through other people's reports. Trust the bell, she said. His jaw tightened. Which bell? The one you cannot see. The rescue captain below rang twice. Lift secured. Morna answered with 3 slow strikes, guiding them toward the western shelf. Avaren held the shutter exactly where she had placed it. The damaged dragon reached stone with both rescue mounts straining beneath the net. Riders ran forward to secure its wing. The missing rider was alive, though ash had burned the edges of his flight mask. Morna did not leave the tower. 15 riders remained beyond the count line. She sent a second white interval. The moths brightened only where the beam touched them. Beyond that, their fire continued to fail. "Memory needs a living flame," she said. "Keep the reserve ember low." Vorin turned toward the clay vessel. That fuel was concealed from Crown inventory. It was kept outside an inventory that once decided a dark beacon was cheaper than a full basin. "You admit withholding royal fuel." "I admit refusing to let a ledger kill another wing." Avaren looked at the vessel. "How much remains?" 4 narrow intervals. "And 16 riders?" 15 now. The next dragon emerged carrying 2 riders, one tied behind the other. Then 3 more crossed the count line in staggered descent. Morna used bells, shutter angles, and the wind book to separate them. The moths showed only the unfinished direction. Human hands still had to bring every rider through it. By the 3rd interval, 10 dragons had landed. The 4th reserve flame waited in the clay vessel. 5 riders remained. Vorin pointed toward a moving light inside hollow ash. "My guide wing. Open the full corridor." Morna studied the color. Blue-white. Too steady for a dragon lantern. "Not yet. You delay trained rescuers while private craft burns out. That light is east of the safe shelf. The storm bends distance. It does not move the shelf." Avaren looked into the ash and saw only brightness. "Can you identify the signal?" "Not from here." Vorin lifted his horn. "Marshal guide wing. Bring the missing flight east by royal corridor." Morna seized the horn before the call finished. He stared at her hand. "You have no authority over marshal communication. I have authority over every return instruction entering this beacon while the count remains open." Avaren did not order her to release it. The moving light flashed twice. Then once. A fleet command pattern. "Follow guide." 4 missing dragons turned toward it. Morna rang the emergency refusal bell. The dragons hesitated. Vorin's face changed by less than a breath. "You are contradicting a royal guide signal. It is leading them away from Cindercliff, toward a clearer descent, toward the eastern ravine." One rider in the storm ignored the guide light and followed the moth line toward Morna's narrow beam. The other 4 continued east. Morna used the final reserve ember. The white interval cut across hollow ash and struck the guide light from the side. For one instant, its housing became visible. Not a rescue lantern. A portable marshal route beacon fixed beneath a black dragon. The same kind of signal that could have moved enemy scouts without Cindercliff's red light ever crossing the border. The lone returning rider reached the cliff and collapsed from the saddle. Morna knelt beside him. "Who ordered you east?" His lips were gray beneath the ash. "Guide command," he said. "Marshal code." Vorin stepped closer. "Storm confusion. He cannot identify source." The rider pulled a broken blue lens from inside his coat. "We struck one of their guide dragons when we refused." The silver rim carried the private mark of Vorin's root wing. Morna rose. 4 riders were still following that false light into the eastern ravine. And somewhere beyond it, hidden below the official flight roads, another beacon answered with a signal Morna had not seen in 15 years. 3 short pulses. Too long. The apprentice return code Tovan Keel had invented as a boy. The apprentice code did not prove Tovan Keel was alive. It proved someone had kept his signal in use. Morna stood beneath the final white interval while the pattern repeated below the eastern ravine. 3 short pulses. Too long. A pause narrow enough to be mistaken for wind. Tovan had added that pause because apprentice lamps overheated when boys held the shutter too long. No official route manual had ever recorded it. Vorin Tide reached for the signal horn. "An obsolete pattern can be stolen." "Yes," Morna said. "Or copied by an enemy who knows your history. Then why is it answering your private guide beacon?" The 4 remaining riders were still turning east. Their dragons followed the blue-white marshal light deeper into the ravine, where hot ash folded between 2 black cliffs. Avaren looked toward the false guide signal. "Can you call them back?" "Not with the reserve fire gone. Use the main basin. It is cold. Then relight it." Morna faced him. "With what?" The Crown had confiscated the fuel line when the beacon was sealed. The reserve clay vessel lay empty beside her boots. Vorin answered, "My guide wing will retrieve them." "Your guide wing took them off the return path. They followed a lawful marshal signal. A lawful signal does not become safe because frightened riders obey it." Another blue flash came from the ravine. The hidden beacon answered with Tovan's code. Avaren turned to the fuel clerk. "Restore the Cindercliff supply." The main casks were transferred under closure order. "Where?" Vorin said, "To the Marshal Depot. Evidence fuel cannot remain with a suspended keeper. Morna stared at him. You removed the light, blocked the key, and took the fuel. Standard containment. Standard darkness. Avaren's expression changed. Bring the casks back. There is no time, Morna said. The ravine will close before they reach the tower. Ash pressure struck the outer glass hard enough to make the frame groan. The lower current was rising. Then what do you need? Avaren asked. A dragon that can carry flame without losing it. His black war dragon waited on the upper terrace, scales dark as cooled iron. Vorin stepped between them. The king does not enter a blind ravine under the direction of a suspended keeper. He entered one when he extinguished the beacon, Morna said. Avaren looked at her. The truth between them was no longer private enough to soften. You will guide me? I will guide the dragon. Whether you obey is your decision. He removed the black circlet from his brow and placed it on the signal table. Prepare the flame. Morna took the last living coal from beneath the reserve vessel. It was too weak for the beacon, but a dragon's throat could shelter it. She wrapped the coal in ashcloth and carried it to Avaren's mount. The dragon lowered its head. Morna pressed the coal beneath one bronze throat scale. When you reach the ravine mouth, give one breath only, no wider than the cliff gap. Avaren mounted. My night sight will not read the lower shelf. The admission was quiet. Vorin heard it. So did the captains. Morna had known in pieces. Now he placed the whole weakness before witnesses. Then do not follow light, she said. Follow my bells. He looked down at her. You once told me the bell was for men who could not see the road. It is for anyone wise enough to admit it. The dragon launched. Morna climbed to the eastern bell frame. She had no flame left, no moth trail strong enough to hold the route, and 4 riders moving toward a false signal. She had sound. 1 bell strike sent Avaren lower. 2 turned him south. 3 held him above the first hot current. The remaining moths drifted beneath the tower crown, nearly dark. They did not lead him. They only marked where the unfinished return had once pointed. Vorin watched the king disappear into ash. If he falls, the court will know whose command sent him. Morna kept one hand on the bell rope. He chose to fly. You instructed the path, as you instructed the closure. For the first time, Vorin's calm showed strain. The false guide beacon flashed again. The 4 riders descended. Morna rang the emergency refusal pattern until her palms split against the rope. 2 dragons hesitated. The other 2 continued. Then Avaren's dragon breathed. A narrow gold flame cut across the ravine and struck the underside of the portable marshal beacon. Its housing became visible against the ash. Avaren did not destroy it. He flew between the riders and the false light. Morna rang once. Hold. The black dragon opened its wings across the route. The 4 missing mounts broke formation and turned toward him. Below them, the hidden beacon answered with Tovin's code. Not once. Repeatedly. Someone beneath the ravine wanted the official riders to know where the signal came from. Voan lifted a command horn. Marshal Wing, secure the lower station. Morna seized the horn. No armed descent. You have no authority over a military site. Then why was it omitted from every beacon chart? It is a classified emergency relay. Using my son's code. Using a practical pattern. Then let the riders land and inspect it under witness. The site may contain enemy prisoners. Or crown prisoners. Vorin's eyes hardened. You are allowing grief to direct a rescue. No, I am refusing to let classification bury another person. Avaren returned with the 4 riders circling behind him. 1 dragon's wing was scorched. Another rider had tied himself upright with his reins. All 16 sable wing riders had now crossed the count line. The alarm clerk struck the completion bell. The last ember beacon moth landed on the cold rim of the brazier and went dark. Its work was finished. Morna descended to the landing terrace. Avaren dismounted before the soldiers could kneel. The lower beacon remains active, he said. I saw a maintenance platform beneath the ravine. Marshal markings. No enemy banner. Vorin answered calmly. Classified guide infrastructure. Who tends it? Rotating route specialists. Names. Protected under fleet security. One of the recovered riders held out a narrow brass plate torn from the portable beacon. There was a repair tag inside the housing. Morna took it. The edges were worn from repeated handling. One side carried the Marshal Depot number. The other held a keeper's calibration mark. A small hooked line beneath 2 dots. Tovan's apprentice signature. Below it was a service date. Not 15 years ago. The previous winter. The repair tag did not return Morna's son. It made his death impossible to keep calling certain. She held the brass plate beneath the landing torches, while the rescued riders were carried past her toward the infirmary. The service date remained clear beneath Tovan's apprentice mark. Previous winter. Not a copied signature from an old ledger. A hand had cut the calibration line after testing the portable beacon less than a year ago. Vorentide extended his palm. The plate belongs to classified fleet equipment. Morna closed her fingers around it. It belongs to the inquiry you tried to keep inside the dark. You are still under signal misconduct review. And all 16 riders returned because I refused your route. They returned under royal rescue. They returned under keeper bells. Avaren stood between them with ash burned into the seams of his flight coat. His admission about his damaged night sight had already moved through the riders. No one spoke of it, but the silence around him had changed. Seal the plate as evidence, he ordered. Morna looked at him. Under whose custody? Dragon Court. The same court that accepted Voren's ledger before opening the wind record? His face hardened. She did not lower hers. Emergency need had restored her hand. Law had not restored her name. One successful rescue did not make royal custody trustworthy. Avaren turned to the recovered sable-wing captain. You found the plate. You will witness it. Morna will retain physical custody until the lower station is opened. Voren's voice sharpened. The lower relay is protected military ground. Then its existence should appear in the classified route index. It appears under a compartment designation. Show it. Voren signaled to a route clerk, who brought a black-bound register from the marshal chest. The eastern ravine contained no named beacon, only a notation. Temporary guide reserve. Unmanned. Activated during corridor instability. Morna placed Tovan's repair tag beside the entry. Unmanned stations do not recalibrate their own lenses. Route specialists rotate through temporary relays. Names. Protected. Avaren looked toward the four riders Voren's guide signal had drawn east. No station that redirects royal riders remains protected from this inquiry. Prepare a witness descent. Voren stepped close enough that only those nearest could hear. If you open every classified route to public keepers, enemy scouts will learn the skeleton of the fleet. You told me Cindercliff exposed that skeleton, Avaren said. The wind proved it could not. Your private beacon could. Voren did not answer the accusation. He attacked the risk. The kingdom survives because some routes remain unknown. Unknown to whom, Morna asked. The enemy, or the riders expected to trust them? Avaren ordered 6 witnesses. Morna, the sable-wing captain, 2 Dragon Court recorders, 1 neutral beacon keeper from the western cliffs, and himself. Voren insisted on joining. Morna did not object. She wanted him present when the hidden route was forced to speak through records rather than command. They descended at dawn. The eastern ravine swallowed light quickly. Avaren flew beside Morna's hired cliff dragon, following her bell taps through the ash. His black war dragon kept lower than usual, guided by sound rather than his rider's sight. He did not ask her to conceal the weakness again. That was not redemption. It was the first useful truth he had given the people whose lives depended on him. The hidden station stood beneath an overhang of black volcanic stone. Its beacon tower had no crown lantern visible from above. The lens projected sideways through a narrow cut in the ravine, creating a private route only guide riders knew how to follow. Marshal guards met them at the platform. Their commander bowed to Avaren. By sealed order, no entry without Sky Marshal authorization. Avaren looked at Voren. Authorize it. Voren remained mounted. The station houses sensitive prisoners and route personnel. Morna heard the word prisoners. Enemy prisoners? Persons whose release would compromise fleet security. Names. You keep asking for names as if classification were cruelty. It becomes cruelty when families are told there is no body to wait for. Something shifted behind the station shutters. Not a soldier. A thin metallic knock. 3 short, 2 long. Morna's hand tightened around the brass repair tag. Voren signaled to the guards. Secure the inner workroom. The sable-wing captain drew his sword. Avaren's voice cut through the ravine. No one moves a prisoner, record, tool, or body from this station. The guard commander hesitated. That hesitation told Morna more than obedience would have. She dismounted and walked to the outer lens housing. Tovan's calibration mark appeared beneath the bronze frame. Several dates had been filed away, but the newest remained. 6 weeks earlier, the Western Keeper examined it. Same hand as the repair tag, Voren replied. Or a worker trained to reproduce the mark. Morna opened the service panel. Inside lay a row of lens calculations written in charcoal. Tovan had always drawn his sevens with a broken upper stroke because Morna had corrected him too sharply when he was 10. He had kept the habit out of defiance. Every 7 on the wall was broken. Avaren saw her face. You know the hand. I raised it. He moved toward the locked workroom. Morna stopped him. Do not break the door. There may be prisoners inside. There is also a pressure line behind the hinge. Force it and the beacon chamber vents into the room. Voren's eyes flickered toward the hinge. Morna noticed. You knew. I know the station design. Then open it. The lock requires a route keeper. Where is yours? No one answered. Morna fitted Tovan's brass plate into the maintenance slot beside the door. The plate was not a key, but its calibration edge released the outer pressure pin. A second lock remained. From inside came the same pattern. 3 short, 2 long. Then a voice, roughened by years and stone. Mother, do not turn the upper wheel. Morna stopped breathing. The voice was older, lower, but grief had not erased the way Tovan swallowed the end of her name when he was afraid. Voren reached for the emergency seal at his belt. Avaren seized his wrist. Do not. For 15 years, Morna said, still facing the door. You let me tend the road that passed above him. Voren did not confess. He was retained because he possessed route knowledge the enemy had already attempted to obtain. You declared him lost. The fleet protected information that could not safely return to civilian life. Morna turned. You made his mother keep your secret route alive by giving her no grave and no answer. Behind the door, metal scraped. Tovan spoke again. Do not open it under marshal seal. The room is rigged to burn the route ledgers. The witnesses looked toward Voren. He had not admitted what he had done, but the station had just named what his office was prepared to destroy. The danger inside the workroom was not the locked door. It was the heat waiting behind it. Morna pressed her ear to the bronze panel. Tovan, how many burn lines? His answer came through the metal. 3, 1 beneath the ledger shelf, 2 around the chimney throat. Fuel? Marshal, resin, and lamp salt. Voren Tide stood between 2 guards with Avaren's hand still locked around his wrist. The station contains classified routes, Voren said. Emergency destruction prevents capture. Capture by whom? Morna asked. The king standing outside? By anyone who forces entry without proper release. Avaren let go of Voren only after the sable wing captain took his place. Tell us how to release it. Voren's expression returned to calm. The route keeper controls the mechanism. You kept the route keeper behind it, Morna said, because his knowledge required protection. Protection does not lock a man beside the fire meant to erase him. She turned back to the door. Tovan, can you reach the lower line? No. They shortened the chain last winter. The words struck harder than the voice had. Not because he had been imprisoned once, because someone had adjusted his confinement recently. Morna set Tovan's brass plate against the maintenance slot and opened the pressure cover. 3 copper tubes ran behind the hinge. 1 carried air, 2 carried ignition heat. The upper wheel? Avaren asked. Vents the chamber, Morna said. It would feed the burn lines. He stepped back from it without argument. Years ago, he had come to Cindercliff because Morna was the one person who did not ask whether he had won. Now she needed him to do something harder than victory. Hold the lower valve closed, she said. Avaren knelt beside the wall. Voren spoke sharply. My king, the station may be compromised by prisoners trained to manipulate keepers. Tovan is not directing me, Avaren said. Morna is. That did not restore the trust he had extinguished. It kept his strength from becoming another danger. Morna removed Tovan's gauge from her belt and pressed it against each copper line. The first needle held steady. The second climbed. Heat stored in the west tube. Tovan had taught the gauge to measure heat. Men had taught the route system to measure how long a human life could be hidden beneath necessity. Can you cut it? Tovan asked. Not without sending pressure into the room. Then cool it. With what? A pause. My wash basin. The Western keeper found the drain outlet beneath the platform. Morna ordered the basin water drawn through a narrow siphon and fed around the tube casing. The metal began to contract. Inside, Tovan counted each change by sound. 2 more. Morna held the gauge in place until the needle fell below the first silver mark. Now the salt line. She opened the service slit 1 finger and smelled bitter mineral beneath old ash. Mix too strong, she said. It was set to ignite the ledgers before the door fully opened. Voren answered, because route records cannot be permitted to leave this station. Avaren looked at him. Neither could the keeper, apparently. His retention was authorized. By May? By standing marshal power over compromised personnel. Show me the order. It is inside. The circle of logic was perfect. The proof remained locked behind the mechanism designed to burn it. Morna inserted the edge of Tovan's calibration plate beneath the salt catch. It fit because he had designed the housing. She lifted slowly while Avaren held the lower valve closed. The first burn line released. Then the second. The third did not move. Tovan? Chimney throat is tied to my door chain. Morna closed her eyes. Opening the door would ignite the final line unless the chain inside was lifted at the same moment. Can you raise it? My left hand is bound too short. Your right? Broken years ago. It never closed properly. Voren's face remained unreadable. Morna looked at the sable wing captain. Pass me your flight hook. She fed the narrow hook through the service slit. Tovan, find it. Metal scraped inside. Once. Twice. Then the hook caught. On my count, Morna said, lift the chain. Avaren, close the valve harder. Western keeper, pull the salt catch. No one looked to Voren. 3. The mechanism released with a sound like a breath forced from stone. Morna turned the lower wheel. The door opened inward. Morna Keel stood in the dim workroom with one wrist chained to the wall. He was 32 now, not the 17-year-old boy who had vanished into hollow ash. His dark hair had gone gray at the temples. One shoulder sat lower than the other. A burn scar crossed his throat, where a root collar had once rested. Morna did not run to him. The floor between them was still lined with resin. She stepped exactly where he pointed. Only when she reached him did she touch his face. You grew older, she said. So did you. It was not the reunion either had been allowed to imagine. It was better because it was true. Avaren ordered the chain cut. Tovan stopped him. Not yet. The wall ledger is pressure-linked. Morna looked at the shelves. Dozens of route books stood behind silver wire. Each recorded auxiliary closures, private guide signals, diverted patrols, and retained personnel. Voren said, those ledgers contain the Eastern Defense Network. Removing them endangers the kingdom. Then we read them here under witness, Morna replied. Tovan guided her through the release sequence. One by one, the ledgers came free without igniting the resin. The first showed auxiliary beacons deliberately darkened before guide wing deployment. The second showed riders redirected from public routes to marshal corridors. The third listed keepers retained after being officially declared missing. Tovan's name was not alone. There were 11. Avaren read the authorization column. No royal signature appeared. Only repeated use of his delegated route closure authority. Voren had used the power. Avaren had made it broad enough. Morna opened the final ledger. Cindercliff Beacon appeared beside a notation dated 6 months earlier. Maintain Widow Keeper in place. Her consistency stabilizes Eastern return behavior. Remove only if she begins comparing auxiliary failures. The accusation against Morna had not begun when her red intervals burned too long. It had begun when she asked why the other lights were going dark. By the time Morna carried the first route ledger out of the hidden station, Voren's guards had stopped calling Tovan a prisoner. They called him restricted personnel. The new words changed nothing about the chain marks around his wrist. Avaren ordered every ledger sealed beneath 6 witness marks and carried to Cindercliff rather than the palace archive. The 11 retained keepers remained inside the station until their release mechanisms could be examined without triggering the burn lines. Voren objected before the first dragon launched. Those records expose private corridors, guide rotations, and wartime descent points. Taking them to an open beacon creates a fleet-wide security breach. Keeping them here leaves them beside the mechanism built to destroy them, Morna said. The destruction system exists to prevent enemy capture. The enemy never reached this room. Compromise does not require an enemy banner. Avaren looked at the chained workers, the resin beneath the shelves, and the root collar scar across Tovan's throat. No, he said. Apparently it only required delegated authority. Voren's face remained controlled. You gave that authority because the Eastern Fleet was failing. Public beacons were predictable. Enemy scouts learned our return roads. The private network preserved operational surprise. It also darkened routes beneath riders already in the sky, because divided control kills faster than concentrated command. Morna secured the brass repair tag inside the evidence case. Concentrated command kept 11 families waiting for graves that never existed. Voren did not deny the number. He disputed the language. Those keepers possessed route knowledge that could not safely return to civilian life. Tovin stood beside Morna, one hand wrapped against the cold. You kept us maintaining the routes you claimed we could not be trusted to remember. Voren faced him. You were alive because the fleet retained you. I was useful because you did. Avaren ordered Voren's command seal surrendered pending Dragon Court review. Voren removed it slowly. You may take the seal. The Eastern route system will still require one authority before nightfall. Not yours, Morna said. Then whose? A council of keepers debating while dragons lose altitude? A council that cannot darken a return. Light without another keeper recording why. War does not wait for consensus. Neither did the riders you sent toward the ravine. The return flight to Cindercliff moved through clearing ash. Morna rode beside Tovin but did not fill the years with questions, while he was still learning how open sky felt. Once, he looked toward Avaren flying ahead. Did he know? No. Did he ask? Not enough. That answer held the shape of 15 years. At Cindercliff, the 16 sable wing riders stood before the assembled dragon court with bandaged faces and scorched flight coats. Their dragons filled the terraces behind them, wings folded beneath the restored beacon. Morna's service tools remained under confiscation seal. The accusation of unauthorized signaling still stood in the court record. Rescue had returned her hand. Law had not yet returned her name. Voren appeared without his command seal, but still wearing the crimson mantle of Sky Marshal. He addressed the court first. The Sable Wing survived because emergency guide infrastructure existed beneath hollow ash. The loss occurred after Cindercliff transmitted beyond closure, creating conflicting signals. Keeper Morna Keel then interfered with marshal recovery and exposed a classified relay. The Sable Wing captain stepped forward. We were not confused by Cindercliff. Voren looked at him. You were inside heavy ash. We saw no Cindercliff light. It was already dark. What signal did you follow? A court judge asked. A marshal guide beacon. Why? Because the North Shelf Auxiliary was dark, and the guide command carried royal authority. The captain placed the broken blue lens before the court. It led 4 of us toward the eastern ravine after the moth route turned home. Voren answered. The guide wing attempted to bring them through a protected descent. Into the station you claimed was unmanned, Morna said. Temporary designations preserve secrecy. Tovin placed his repair tag beside the lens. I serviced that station last winter. I serviced the guide beacon 6 weeks ago. It was used to move riders away from public routes and toward marshal control. You are a compromised route worker, Voren said. Your testimony protects your mother and excuses your own cooperation. Tovin did not raise his voice. I cooperated because 11 of us were chained beside burn lines. The released keepers arrived under Dragon Court guard before sunset. One by one, they confirmed auxiliary darkenings, false inspection logs, and private route signals. None claimed Voren personally sealed every ignition or issued every order. They named his office, his field kits, his guide captains, and the authority structure he controlled. Voren stood through all of it. The network worked, he said when the testimony ended. Enemy strikes declined after centralization. Fleet losses fell. Treaty corridors remained hidden. You judge the cost now because you survived long enough to become sentimental about methods. Morna faced him across the beacon court. You reduced visible losses by deciding which disappearances would never enter the count. I preserved the kingdom. You preserved the part that answered to you. Avaren removed the narrow black circlet from his brow. The route closure authority was mine. The court became still. I granted full discretion after the Ashfall campaign because my night sight was damaged and I feared the fleet would see weakness in its king. I relied on Voren's reports instead of opening the keeper records. I permitted a system broad enough to darken return routes, conceal workers, and move riders under my name. Voren turned. You cannot govern by confessing every limitation before rivals. I governed by hiding one. Others paid for it. It was not an apology to Morna. It was a public surrender of concealment. Avaren ordered Morna's signal charge suspended, every auxiliary closure reviewed, and all retained keepers released into neutral custody. Then he placed the beacon key on the court table. Morna Keel will resume Cindercliff command until the network is lawfully reassigned. She did not take it. Temporary command under the same crown that removed it. The riders need a keeper tonight. They need a network no single king or marshal can blind. Voran's gaze moved toward the eastern signal tower. A small bronze wheel began turning inside its housing. Tovin saw it first. Mother! Across the horizon, one auxiliary beacon went dark. Then another. Then 5. The closure bells began ringing from ridge to ridge, each carrying the same automatic command. Marshal authority revoked. Network denial. Protocol active. Avaren's face hardened. I gave no such order. Tovan opened the contingency ledger. The protocol required no new command. It had been built to trigger if Voran's seal was removed. Every eastern beacon was preparing to extinguish before the Night Wings returned. The eastern horizon went black in sections. Cindercliff remained lit, but every auxiliary ridge began closing beneath the denial protocol. Bronze shutters turned over their own lenses. Fuel gates locked. Return bells rang without keeper hands. 3 Night Wings were still airborne. Morna took the contingency ledger from Tovan. How long before full closure? 7 minutes for the northern line, 9 for the coast. The central command wheel will seal Cindercliff last. Voran Tide stood beneath guard beside the court table. The protocol prevents a compromised network from being seized, he said. Once root authority is removed, every private corridor closes until command is restored. Restored to whom? Morna asked. To a single verified marshal. The answer revealed the architecture more clearly than any confession. Even disgrace had been designed to make the fleet require him again. Avaren reached for the beacon key. Morna took it first. 1 key will not reopen, 12 ridges. The crown override can stop the sequence. Tovin shook his head. Only from the central wheel beneath the eastern signal tower. The override shaft crosses the denial furnace. How do we reach it? We do not, Voran said. Not before the shutters close. Morna opened the keeper register. Each auxiliary beacon had an emergency handbell, a local fuel basin, and a resident keeper whose authority the marshal network had reduced to maintenance. The denial protocol could close lenses through the command wire. It could not stop a keeper from burning an independent return flame if the fuel gate was opened manually. Send no royal override, she said. Call the keepers. A court judge frowned. Through which command? Not command. Count. Morna struck Cindercliff's bell in the oldest return pattern. Number of wings aloft, direction of storm, riders still unlanded. Tovin joined her on the second rope. Across the dark ridges, 1 keeper answered. Then another. Not all of them. Some had been removed. Others had been trained to wait for marshal permission. Morna rang again. A closure order could end a route. It could not erase riders still inside it. Open the emergency fuel ledgers, she ordered the court clerks. Name every keeper on duty. Send riders to the silent stations with witnesses, not officers. Voran stepped forward against the guard's hand. If independent flames ignite together, the enemy will read the entire return network. The enemy already had your private guide signals, Morna said. Tonight the riders need roads more than you need secrets. Avaren looked toward the central tower. If the denial furnace completes, it will lock Cindercliff too. Then stop that part, Morna said. With what? Your authority began the network. Use your body where authority is no longer enough. Tovin showed him the service diagram. The command shaft could be severed beneath the furnace, but the heat chamber was built for a dragon-blooded operator wearing crown armor. Avaren removed the black circlet and handed it to the chief judge. If I do not return, no marshal inherits route authority. The court will recognize the Keeper Council Morna establishes tonight. Voran's voice sharpened. You would surrender the fleet to lighthouse workers during an eastern threat. I surrendered it to one man after hiding my weakness. I will not repeat the shape of that mistake. He entered the service tower with Tovin guiding him from the diagram. Morna did not watch the door close. 3 wings were still in darkness. The first northern beacon answered with a narrow white flame. Then, the coast station opened. At the western ridge, a keeper rang refusal. Fuel gate sealed. Morna sent 2 riders carrying hand tools and a Dragon Court witness. No marshal seal went with them. The denial wheel reached Cindercliff. The bronze shutter began descending over the great lens. Inside the tower, metal screamed. Avaren's dragonfire flashed through the lower vents. Not victory. Labor. The shutter stopped halfway. Hold the return mirror, Morna ordered. Court officers took the chains. Formerly retained keepers joined them. Tovin climbed to the fuel platform despite his injured hand and corrected the basin draw. One by one, the auxiliary flames returned under local hands. The night wings appeared as dark shapes against the ash. Keepers called their counts from ridge to ridge. No single office owned the route. Every landing was witnessed twice. When the final dragon crossed Cindercliff's inner line, the completion bell sounded across the eastern cliffs. Only then did Morna lower the main flame. Avaren emerged from the service tower with one sleeve burned away and the command shaft in his hands. He placed it before Dragoncourt. No crown override will be rebuilt. The public judgment lasted until morning. Vorin defended his system as necessary centralization. The court did not condemn him for building classified routes or reducing enemy strikes. It condemned the false inspection records, unlawful detention of keepers, pretextual charge against Morna, destruction mechanisms tied to living prisoners, and automatic punishment of the network when his authority was challenged. Morna's accusation was withdrawn from the public record. Her tools and Cindercliff key were returned without condition. The old fuel reduction order that had erased Tovin's wing was reopened, and every retained keeper's family received the truth before compensation was discussed. Morna refused appointment as Royal Beacon Mistress. Instead, she formed the Eastern Keeper Council. No return light could be extinguished before a witnessed count. No auxiliary closure could occur under one seal. Every route order required a keeper record independent of Crown and Marshal command. Avaren submitted his delegation powers and concealed night-sight injury to formal review. He remained king, but no longer possessed unilateral authority over the beacon network. Months later, Tovin repaired the Cindercliff mirrors beside his mother. Neither tried to replace 15 stolen years with easy words. Avaren came after winter patrol without guards or circlet. He stopped outside the furnace room. Morna did not ask whether he had won. He did not ask whether she had forgiven him. The Western lens is losing heat, she said. What does it require? Someone strong enough to hold the frame and disciplined enough not to move until told. He removed his coat and took his place beside the mechanism. When Morna set her hand over his to correct the pressure, he stayed still. Outside, the Ember Beacon moths slept in completed ash. They would wake only when a return remained unfinished. Nothing between Morna and Avaren would be allowed to live that way.